My name is Victoria Vance. I am 34 years old. 3 weeks before Christmas, I was sitting at my kitchen island, calmly watching my sister-in-law dig her own grave with a 14-carat Cartier bracelet she did not earn, and have buried a father. I have buried a little sister and know what graves look like. This particular grave was small, it was solid gold, it cost $8,400, and it was paid for with money explicitly meant for dying children with failing hearts. My phone was vibrating on the marble counter. Hannah was calling to dictate our family Christmas plans. She was going to smile through the speaker and arrogantly tell me to take the basement room in my own lake house. What she didn't know is what was actually in that room. She didn't know what was inside the 47-page forensic audit sitting right next to my coffee cup. And she didn't know that 3 weeks ago I had driven to Boston and signed an airtight legal affidavit with a federal white-collar prosecutor. By January 18th, my sister-in-law's curated life was going to look drastically different from her flawless Instagram grid. And the absolute worst part for her wasn't the 27-month prison sentence I am about to mention. The worst part is the exact room she just demanded I sleep in. It was the Tuesday afternoon right after Thanksgiving. I was pouring a cup of Earl Grey tea into a ceramic mug my older brother Matthew had given me years ago. The phone rang. It was Hannah. "Victoria," she said, making my name sound like a tedious chore she had to cross off her list. "Matthew and I have been thinking about Christmas. We want to take the whole family up to the lake house. Just the 5 of us, me, Matthew, the kids, and you. Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, the whole festive experience." "That sounds lovely, Hannah," I said evenly, "and here is the absolute best part." She paused. It was the specific kind of manipulative pause sales managers train into junior associates. "We figured you could take the walkout room, the basement room, that way you have your own space. You've been looking so tired lately, Victoria." I looked at the small blue glass jar sitting on my kitchen counter. The jar my little sister Caroline had filled with pale cold lake sand in October 2011, right before her heart finally stopped beating. "That sounds lovely, Hannah," I repeated, my voice dropping 10 degrees. "Let me just check my calendar." "Oh, you don't need to check, sweetie. We've already blocked out the dates for you," she chirped. I smiled at the jar of sand. The jar did not smile back. "Of course," I said softly. "I will see you there." I hung up the phone and stood still at the counter for a long, heavy minute. Then I pulled out a yellow leather notebook from my drawer and wrote 4 words. Hannah had just called me tired. She had been passive calling me tired for 2 entire years. In a toxic family dynamic, the word tired is load-bearing. It is how a parasitic sister-in-law begins the psychological process of moving a successful woman to the back of the house. I poured a second cup of tea and I waited. Welcome back to Grace and Grit Stories, where women who refuse to be silenced find their footing, their power, and their undeniable voice. If this toxic dynamic sounds like your own life, you are who I made this for. Drop a comment, tell me where you are watching from, and be sure to hit that subscribe button. Let me tell you who I am so the rest of this legal execution lands with the absolute weight it deserves. I am a crisis PR director and a certified forensic investigator. I specialize in corporate disaster management. When a Fortune 500 CEO gets caught embezzling millions, I am the one the board calls to clean up the blood, trace the offshore accounts, and manage the federal fallout. I read microscopic financial fine print for a living, and I am exceptionally lethal at it. But my family? They assume because I am quiet, single, and don't wear flashy designer labels that I am just a stressed-out corporate drone. I built my luxury lake house from scratch when I was 28, using my first massive crisis management payout. The house sits on a dramatic 12-acre slope on the southwest shore of Lake George. A normal, unimaginative architect would have flattened the land. I didn't. I designed the structure to flow with the steep slope. The house has 3 floors, but you enter onto the middle level. The top floor is for guest bedrooms. The bottom level, the exact level Hannah arrogantly called the basement, is actually a stunning walkout suite. It features floor-to-ceiling panoramic glass windows, radiant heated red oak floors, and a private 12-step wooden path leading to the water. I specifically designed that back bedroom in the winter of 2011. My little sister Caroline was 15 years old at the time. She had hypoplastic left heart syndrome. We had just been gently told by the specialists that her failing heart wasn't pumping enough oxygen for her to climb the stairs anymore, and the transplant list simply wasn't going to reach her in time. So, I gave her the absolute best room in the house and gave her the room with the best morning light. I gave her the room with the lake. Hannah called a dark basement. Architects call it a walkout level. There is a massive psychological difference, and that difference matters deeply. The kind of person who calls a panoramic suite a basement is a person who has never learned to look at a single thing twice. Hannah was a one-look person. She built her entire shallow life on one-look judgments. And judged the room, she judged me, and she had already judged a dying child she had never even met. I put my hand flat against the cold marble counter, and had built that house with my own blood, sweat and money. I had watched my little sister take her final breath in that beautiful room. And now my brother's greedy wife wanted to blindly pack me into it like I was a piece of forgotten luggage. Caroline died on November 14, 2011. Her bed faced the panoramic windows, because I had physically wheeled it there myself so the first light of the morning would hit her face. A year after she died, I did the only logical thing a forensic investigator can do with suffocating grief, and legally incorporated a foundation. Heart Heroes is what Caroline had wanted to call it. It funds families who have children with severe congenital heart conditions. It covers the crippling travel costs to specialty hospitals, the massive insurance gaps, and the devastating funeral costs that nobody wants to talk about. The best part of the foundation: I keep the lake house totally free for 2 or 3 families a year. I handpicked them myself in September of this year. An application crossed my desk from a woman named Sarah Bradford. She was a single mother. Her husband had been killed 2 years prior in an accident. Her 9-year-old son, Cizan, had the exact same diagnosis Caroline had: hypoplastic left heart syndrome. He was status 1A on the pediatric transplant list. I read Sarah's heartbreaking letter twice. The second time, my hands were violently shaking. I immediately signed the approval for a free stay at the lake house from December 23rd through January 1st. I wrote Sarah one single line on the envelope: the light in the back bedroom comes in at sunrise. Mason should sleep in that room. I did not tell Hannah about Mason or tell my brother Matthew. That sacred room had been legally promised to a dying boy long before Hannah called to dictate my Christmas schedule. A week before Thanksgiving, I drove to Albany for a mandatory family dinner at Matthew and Hannah's house. Hannah had recently gutted and redesigned their dining room in a style she called modern farmhouse. It looked like a Pinterest board had suffered a severe head injury. Matthew was hiding in the kitchen, billing hours on his phone. He kissed my forehead without actually looking at me, and had been doing that exact hollow gesture for 3 years. Hannah brought me out to their sunroom. That is when I saw it. She had a thick Cartier love bracelet clamped onto her wrist. Golden diamonds lined up in a row like teeth. It threw aggressive, expensive light against the wall. "Victoria," she said, arranging her botoxed face into something that loosely resembled compassion. "I love your little foundation, I really do, but Caroline died 15 years ago. You need to move on. It's just not healthy to obsess over the past." Outside, the bitter November wind pushed dead leaves against the screen. "Move on to what exactly, Hannah?" I asked softly. "Just to the present. To your living, breathing family. We are here and need you here, not trapped in the tragic past." I vividly noticed she refused to say Caroline's name. A toxic sister-in-law's grammar is a very specific, revealing language. In the kitchen, Olivia, my sweet 6-year-old niece, looked up from her crayons. "Auntie Vic," she said happily, "can I see Aunt Caroline's blue jar of sand again next time I come over?" Hannah's face violently spasmed. "Olivia, sweetheart, that is enough about that depressing jar." I looked at Olivia and offered a warm, genuine smile. "Yes, my love, anytime you want." I looked back at the blinding Cartier diamonds on Hannah's wrist. "I am a forensic accountant. I know what a mid-tier lawyer's salary looks like and know their mortgage rate. I know their car payments. Their legitimate combined income did not look like a $14,000 diamond bracelet." I drove home that night past the Iron Bridge and kept my hands still at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel. I didn't even turn on the radio. I sat down at my kitchen counter at 11:15 p.m., and I picked up my yellow leather notebook and wrote 2 terrifying words: Cartier where. That was the quiet beginning of the absolute end. It was the following June when Margaret Ellis, my foundation's loyal bookkeeper, came to my office. Margaret is 58, a certified CPA, and she has the patience of solid stone. She nervously knocked on my glass door. She never knocks, Victoria. Her voice was paper-thin. She was clutching her encrypted laptop tightly against her chest. "I need to show you something immediately. I am probably wrong, but I have to ask before I file the Q2 tax disclosures." She turned the laptop screen toward me. I read the highlighted spreadsheet line twice. $4 300 line item, miscellaneous administrative, no invoices, no vendor listed, no memo, and Hannah's digital signature stamped on the financial disbursement. Hannah had volunteered to take over as the foundation's treasurer 18 months ago, claiming she wanted to help the family legacy. I slowly closed the laptop and poured Margaret a cup of tea. I put my hand gently over hers. Margaret, take a deep breath. We are going to look at this together. Do not file Q2 until I explicitly tell you to. She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. Victoria too didn't want to accuse your sister-in-law. I am glad you did, I said softly, and sent Margaret home for the day. I locked the office and walked back to my house in the fading afternoon light. The lake was as smooth as glass. I picked up my phone and dialed a secure number I had kept in my contacts for a decade. A man named Miguel Reyes answered on the third ring. He is the most ruthless private financial auditor on the East Coast. Miguel, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper, I need an quiet, absolute scorch-the-earth audit. The yellow notebook came out of my desk drawer that night. I turned to a fresh blank page and wrote at the top, Heart Heroes Foundation Q1 2025 forward. Then I made a federal checklist. 1. Quarterly financial reports last 18 months. 2. Subpoena bank statements for operating account. 3. Run Stealth LLC search on Hannah. 4. Federal wire fraud threshold is $5 per transaction. I didn't call Matthew, I didn't call my mother, I didn't alert a single soul in my family. When a load-bearing wall cracks, you do not paint over it. You silently measure the damage, you document the structural failure, and then you systematically tear the entire house down. Import SIS content. By the time I closed that yellow leather notebook, I had a structured plan that would brutally end in a federal courtroom. Hannah unfortunately had a shallow, pathetic plan that would end in my beautiful walkout suite. July and August are quiet months on the pristine waters of Lake George. The private wooden docks fill up with expensive boats in the early mornings, and they empty out by the late evening. The heavy summer pollen falls, the massive lake base moves slowly into the cooler shadows of the coves, and everything holds a heavy, suffocating silence. In those 2 sweltering months, Miguel Reyes built an impenetrable federal case in a secure studio in the Back Bay of Boston. I met him twice, both times at a nondescript, unmemorable coffee shop located far outside the city limits of Albany. He wore a plain, unassuming gray polo shirt and brought a single legal pad. He never wrote on it and just listened. 3 more months, Victoria, Miguel told me in late August, his dark eyes totally flat. Maybe 4 months if she gets sloppy. I want the secondary LLC shell documents and want the fraudulent cruise booking. I want everything her digital signature touched. Take whatever time you need, Miguel. I replied, what I did during those exact same sweltering months was perform a masterclass in psychological warfare, and drove to Albany on a humid Sunday in July holding a homemade organic chicken casserole. Hannah arrogantly opened the front door wearing $200 Lululemon yoga pants and a theatrical, manufactured apology for being so stressed lately. The apology was fake, I had not asked for one, and calmly ate her underseasoned chicken. I praised my niece Olivia's beautiful cursive penmanship and asked my nephew Liam about his new expensive tricycle. I tightly hugged Hannah at the door and softly promised I would be back very soon. As I walked toward my car in the massive driveway, Hannah's snobby socialite friend Becca had just parked her luxury SUV. Hannah rushed out, laughed, hugged Becca with one arm, and showed off her brand new jaw-dropping handbag. A black Hermes Birkin with gleaming palladium hardware. I am not a high-fashion influencer, but as a forensic accountant I have laser-focused eyes for luxury assets. I estimated $14,000 on the high side, maybe $12,000 on the low side, assuming it was even real. We paid for it from a brilliant side investment Matthew and I made. Hannah arrogantly bragged to Becca, ignoring my presence. I drove back home and did not stop crying at the Iron Bridge. I did stop at a local Stewart's shop, bought an ice-cold Diet Coke and drank half of it while staring blankly at the empty parking lot. That exact night I furiously wrote in my yellow notebook. Hermes Birkin Black Palladium, estimated value $14, October sighting date confirmed. Matthew received 0 firm bonuses this fiscal year. Cross-reference with Miguel's latest audit, forensic investigators are trained in the dark art of patience. A complex wire fraud case takes years to build, so does exposing a toxic person. Hannah started a new group text message. She obnoxiously titled it Vance Family Lake George Christmas Planning 2026 and added 3 flashing Christmas tree emojis. She added Matthew and added my youngest brother Jonathan. And she added me. Her very first message was 3 massive paragraphs long. I read it once stone-faced and then I read it a second time because during the first read, I had actually been laughing out loud in my kitchen. Okay team, here is the master plan. The text read, Matthew and I will take the massive master suite, the kids will go in the beautiful upstairs guest room. Jonathan will take the loft space, Victoria will stay down in the walkout basement. You previously said you loved that room anyway. Vic, also Christmas Eve dinner I am hosting at the lake house. Please, no depressing Heart Heroes Foundation talk this year. Let's keep it super light, positive and festive. There was quite frankly a sickening amount of audacity to admire in that single text message. She had relegated me to a room she had no idea belonged to my deceased sister, and had forcefully scheduled a massive holiday vacation around the exact same charitable foundation she was robbing blind. She had asked us in advance not to discuss the very thing she had been quietly, maliciously using as a personal luxury credit line for 18 full months, and had also, somewhere buried in that toxic paragraph, forcefully told the impending federal jury what she had been arrogantly thinking. Matthew wrote back in 9 seconds, sounds great, babe. So excited Jonathan, my youngest brother who was currently finishing his medical residency, did not respond for 6 agonizing. When he finally did reply, he sent thumbs up emoji. Lowercase no comment, I wrote back looking forward to it. At 4:30 in the afternoon, I underlined nothing in my mind. I closed my phone and poured a fresh cup of tea. I watched the Canadian geese cross the freezing lake. Jonathan's complete day felt incredibly, terrifyingly strange. Jonathan, who had been a chatty, energetic boy and had beautifully grown into an quiet, focused medical man, did not usually send passive-aggressive emojis. He had once told me during his first year of medical school that digital emojis were basically linguistic shrugs for cowards. He used the exact word linguistic and was 23 at the time. I had been amused he had now violently linguistically shrugged at an insulting sentence he should have been angry about on my behalf. I violently made a fast note in the yellow notebook. Jonathan silent. Why? Late October on a freezing Tuesday at 8:30 p.m. I was in my heavy oak study reading a book of Mary Oliver poetry when the private landline rang on the side table. Victoria, Jonathan said softly, I just wanted to check on something. He was using the exact same clinical voice he used at the hospital. I have known that specific devastating voice for 15 years. He used it when he was about to gently tell a desperate parent that their fragile child was not going to wake up from the emergency surgery the way the family had prayed. Are you all right, Jonathan? I asked softly, my stomach dropping. I am fine, Victoria, are you okay financially? He stumbled over the aggressive words. Hannah casually mentioned to me, she said you might be overspending on the Heart Heroes Foundation. I want to make sure you are not overextending yourself into bankruptcy. A long, suffocating silence violently stretched across the phone line. I am not overextending myself, Jonathan, I said, my voice as cold as absolute zero. Okay. Why does Hannah think I am going bankrupt, Jonathan? I don't know, Vic, she just casually mentioned it in passing. Please just be safe, okay? He hung up the phone. 90 seconds, maybe significantly less. I sat alone in the massive leather chair with the phone gripped tightly in my hand for a very long time. The Mary Oliver poetry book was wide open on my knee. There is a specific devastating poem in there about a wild goose. The line is, you do not have to be good. Caroline used to ask me to read it to her when her lungs were failing. I had read it out loud at her freezing funeral. Jonathan had not visited me at the lake house in 8 massive months. 8 I had counted in the specific way a protective older sister constantly counts. And now Jonathan, who had refused to drive up to Lake George since the brutal month of February, was on the private phone at 8:30 p.m. on a random Tuesday asking if I was facing financial ruin. I violently closed the Mary Oliver book. I opened the yellow leather notebook and wrote one terrifying line. Jonathan, possible compromised, compare Hannah's toxic influence, compare exact timing of federal audit. Then I violently underlined the word compromised. I underlined it twice. I did not call him back or text him. And let my youngest brother sit alone in his expensive apartment in Albany, and I let my own chest violently hurt for half an hour without doing anything about it. Forensic architects do not make massive moves on mere suspicion. We measure the first freezing week of November. I drove the 4 agonizing hours straight to Boston. Ellen Pierce's elite federal law office is on Beacon Street. Her massive mahogany desk faces the heavy double doors. She does not believe in warm fuzzy pleasantries before a brutal federal case, and she did not offer any. Miguel's final devastating audit was resting on the desk. 47 pages, Hannah Vance, Ellen said sharply, leaning forward. 18 months, $147,500 stolen. I sat down in the leather wingback chair. Massive federal wire fraud, she said. 18 United States Code Section 1343. The federal threshold is a microscopic $5,000. She cleared that threshold more than 30 individual times. What is the exact sentencing guideline, Ellen? I asked softly, my voice devoid of any human emotion. Estimated sentencing guideline is 21 to 27 months in a federal penitentiary for a first-time, nonviolent offender with no cooperation deal. The U.S. Attorney's Office in the Northern District of New York is competent. If we go to them with this absolute goldmine, they will violently take it. What is the weak alternative option? I asked just to confirm, civil litigation and legally freeze her secondary LLC. We settle out of court. She pays massive financial restitution, it stays quiet, she probably keeps her fake pharmacy license. She keeps her toxic marriage. I sat in the freezing Boston silence for one long minute. She didn't just steal money, Ellen, I whispered violently. I know, Ellen replied, her eyes flat. She stole from a dying child's legacy. She violently stole from my dead sister's name. I know, Victoria, take it federal, I commanded, my voice cracking like a massive whip. Ellen nodded once. She did not smile or write anything down on a notepad. You are sure? I am completely, undeniably sure. All right, I will file the criminal referral tomorrow morning. Once it goes in, the U.S. Attorney's Office will take it from our hands. We cannot stop the violent train once it leaves the station. I want one more month of Miguel's audit, I said. I violently want the luxury cruise receipts, the plastic surgery wire transfers, and want the fraudulent LLC's state tax returns. Then we send it to the feds. I drove back the 4 grueling hours to the freezing lake. I violently stopped at a local rundown diner in Lennox. I ordered a tuna melt sandwich I could not taste. The elderly waitress kindly called me honey. I tipped her a massive 30%. When I finally got home to the freezing empty lake house, I sat at the marble kitchen counter and put the heavy yellow notebook flat on the freezing stone. I wrote down one devastating date, January 18th. That, Ellen had coldly stated, was the exact date when the sealed federal indictment would most likely drop like a massive nuclear bomb. A week and a half before the aggressive Thanksgiving holiday, Hannah called me on a quiet Thursday afternoon. It was the absolute middle of the afternoon. I was washing 2 ceramic coffee cups by hand, with open users Mamakos da Bunt 4, Revenge Girl 102 Translations da Generate Part 2. Pi F. Vic, right, Hannah chirped through the tiny speaker, sounding cheerful. Just confirming you are okay with taking the basement room for the holiday week. Of course, Hannah, I replied smoothly. And Matthew said you love it down there anyway. It is such a beautiful, isolated little room. Victoria, she paused, her voice dripping with artificial, syrupy concern. And Victoria, please do not get upset with me, but Caroline died 15 full years ago. You need to start letting go of that depressing bedroom. It is literally just a room. We have all been worried about your mental health, the massive grief. You have been carrying it for so long. We violently want you to be present with us, with your actual living family. I let her finish her little rehearsed speech. There were 41 agonizing seconds of it. I did not interrupt her and dried the ceramic coffee cup in my hand with the exact same linen towel I had been using for 5 years. Hannah, I said softly. Yes, Victoria. You are absolutely, mathematically right. It is literally just a room. The aggressive pause on the other end of the phone line was a massive piece of psychological architecture all on its own. Hannah had expected fierce emotional resistance. She had violently wanted a screaming match to prove I was unstable, and had not gotten any resistance at all. She did not know what to do with a calm, flat yes. Okay, great, she stammered nervously. Thank you, Victoria. She hung up first. Hannah always hangs up first. I violently stood at the kitchen sink. The massive lake was iron gray in the freezing November light. The wooden dock had a thin, aggressive skin of solid ice coating the planks. I put the linen towel down and walked to my study. I took the yellow leather notebook out of the massive drawer and added one line below the January 18th federal deadline. December 24th, bring Caroline cedar box. I underlined it once. Hannah had told me in her thoughtful, toxic way that Caroline was literally just a room. Caroline was not just a room, Caroline was a massive load-bearing wall, and Hannah, who had been chipping away at that massive wall for 3 violent years, had now arrogantly told me where to forcefully stand when the wall violently came crashing down on her head. That exact night I went into my heavy oak study. The massive cedar box has been sitting on the top bookshelf since the bitter winter of 2011. Tongue and groove construction with a heavy brass hinge I bought from a local hardware store in Lake Placid. and built the wooden box myself the freezing spring after Caroline violently died because I needed to physically use my hands and could not face managing another corporate crisis account. I slowly lifted the heavy lid. The sharp smell of rich cedar still came up, fainter now, but there inside were massive pieces of my heart. Faded stick figures Caroline had drawn in the pediatric hospital. A bright green and blue participant ribbon from a local summer parade. A small delicate braid of her fine hair tightly tied with a red thread taken the devastating day she violently went into hospice care. 3 small illegible notes she wrote me with the wax crayons the hospice nurses kept by the sterile bed. And buried deep under everything else, a yellowed envelope. I had never opened it. It had been violently sitting there for 15 agonizing years. She gave it to me the absolute day before she violently died and weakly put it in my hand and softly whispered, "For the after, Vicky. When you forcefully forget." I had arrogantly assumed I would never forcefully forget, and had refused to open the envelope. That was pure unadulterated hubris. That was a 15-year massive suffocating hubris. I opened it right now. The fragile paper inside was lined. Her handwriting was the careful, deliberate handwriting of a 15-year-old whose lungs were failing but who refused to stop fighting. "Dear Vicky, if I cannot stay here with you, please remember that the freezing lake will always come back every single summer. Please remember to put my blue jar of sand right by the panoramic window. Please remember that other sick kids will need this massive room. I told the angels to send them to you. Please be violently ready. Love forever, Caroline." I violently held the fragile page for a very, very long time. The heavy blue glass jar was resting on the marble kitchen counter where it had been sitting since 2011. Other sick kids will need this massive room. Caroline had known. Caroline, in the freezing October of 2011, had violently told the universe to send them to my front door. I closed the fragile envelope. I forcefully set it on top of the blue jar of cold sand. I said one thing out loud, the very first thing I had violently said out loud about her in many suffocating years. "I am ready, sweet girl. I am violently ready right now." I violently went back to the yellow leather notebook. Underlined December 24th twice. Then I violently picked up the phone and called Sarah Bradford. If an aggressive memory of someone you violently lost gives you massive strength, tell me their first name in the comments right now. I violently read everyone. A freezing Saturday in mid-November, 11 a.m. I was in the kitchen violently rolling out a massive pie crust because I cannot read the depressing November news without baking pie. A heavy car door slammed violently in the icy driveway. I looked up. Jonathan, his massive Tesla, not the cheap rental he had been driving in the spring. He came in through the back door without knocking, and has violently done that since he was 10 years old. He kissed the side of my forehead. He violently took a tall stool at the marble counter and looked at the flour-covered pie crust as if he had never seen baking flour before in his entire life. "Victoria, coffee." I poured him a steaming cup and did not violently ask him why he was here. I continued rolling out the massive crust. "Victoria," he whispered, "has Margaret Ellis been around the foundation office lately?" I violently stopped the heavy rolling pin. I started again. "She is violently there 4 days a week, Jonathan. She does the massive books. Has she been talking to you about the foundation's operating accounts?" I violently set down the heavy rolling pin on the marble counter. "Jonathan, why are you asking me this?" He violently looked at me. His eyes were a father's dark eyes. "Just violently be careful what massive documents you sign right now. Victoria, do not trust toxic people, even family, especially aggressive family." A massive suffocating silence filled the kitchen. "All right, Jonathan," I whispered. He drank a third of his scalding coffee. He violently looked at the blue jar of sand on the marble counter. He did not touch it and stood up. "I violently have to go, Vic. You haven't been here in 8 massive months. John, I violently know." He kissed my forehead again. He violently left. He did not finish his expensive coffee. I stood in the freezing kitchen with 2/3 of a cup of expensive coffee violently sitting on the marble counter, a half-rolled massive pie crust and a yellow leather notebook violently screaming in the study. I violently wrote in the notebook that exact night, "Jonathan knows something. Hannah's ally or working violently against her. I did not know which and was going to violently find out very soon." December 3rd, Boston Beacon Street. Miguel had delivered the massive final forensic report 2 days before. The luxury cruise wire transfers, the massive plastic surgery receipts, a $31,000 rhinoplasty in Manhattan, paid in 2 massive wire transfers. The lavish Disney trip, the massive down payment on an investment condo Hannah had been considering buying with her toxic sister. The massive shell LLC in Delaware called Vance Holdings. 84 massive pages of devastating federal evidence. Ellen Pierce slid the massive referral packet across her mahogany desk. Initial date, page through, she commanded aggressively. I did 47 pages of Miguel's forensic audit, 84 pages of massive wire evidence, a devastating 4-page cover affidavit in my own aggressive voice that Ellen had violently written and I had massively revised. A massive bank statement summary, a violent timeline that ended in late October. I signed the massive affidavit slowly, twice my full legal name, Victoria June Vance. Ellen typed furiously for 1 massive minute on her encrypted laptop. She violently hit send, the small digital cursor blinked. It is filed, she said coldly. U.S. Attorney's Office, Northern District of New York, Albany. Now what exactly? I asked. Now we wait. They will violently assign a massive prosecutor, usually a massive week. Sometimes too, they will send confirmation with the assigned AUSA if they violently take it, and they will take it. They will begin building a massive grand jury. I violently expect a sealed indictment by mid-January. A massive arrest follows within days. She will be violently told to surrender January 18th. That is a massive guess, but an accurate one. I violently closed the massive folder. I stood up. Ellen looked at me. Victoria, this will be a massively hard Christmas. It will not be the hardest massive one I have spent, I whispered violently, and drove back to the freezing Lake George the long way on Route 9. I violently stopped at the rundown diner in Lenox a massive second time. The exact same elderly waitress, she remembered me. She violently brought me a massive slice of warm pecan pie without asking. She did not call me honey this massive time. She violently called me ma'am. I left her a massive 40% tip. When I finally got home, I violently wrote in the yellow notebook. Filed January 18th. I closed the massive notebook. I violently went upstairs to massively make the Bradford family's soft beds. December 23rd. 2 in the afternoon. The pale winter sunlight was already failing against the dark tree line. A rusted blue station wagon turned slowly into the long winding driveway. Sarah Bradford was hunched behind the freezing steering wheel. Mason was safely tucked in the back seat, the heavy metallic oxygen tank resting on the frozen floorboards. I immediately walked outside without grabbing my winter coat. Sarah is 34, tall, thin, and exhausted in a specific devastating way. I intimately recognized the profound, suffocating tiredness of a mother who has not slept a full night in 3 grueling years and who refuses to ask anyone to notice her pain. Her dark hair was pulled tightly back. She wore a faded Carhartt jacket and slowly opened Mason's car door. He stepped out very carefully and was small for a 9-year-old, terribly pale, with the distinct, terrifying fine blue line circling the corner of his small mouth that I vividly remembered from my own sister's final months. Vance, Sarah whispered nervously, extending a trembling, freezing hand. Mason looked slowly up at me. His large dark eyes were serious, calculating the strange environment. Is this massive house really our home for 10 entire days, ma'am? He asked softly. Mason replied, kneeling down to meet his eye level in the snow. It is your house. The massive frozen lake is also yours. Just please do not fall in. The dark water is cold. He smiled. It was a very small, genuine smile. I had personally laid Mason's soft beds myself earlier that morning. Crisp, expensive white linen sheets, the heavy hand-stitched quilt my grandmother had made in 1982, a large ceramic bowl of fresh clementines on the wooden dresser, and the heavy blue jar of cold sand resting safely on the massive windowsill. I had moved it from the kitchen marble counter exclusively for him. This is my massive room, he asked, looking around the walkout suite in absolute awe. Yes, sweet boy, the morning light is good for drawing stars. Sarah violently turned her face away to hide her tears. She tightly put her shaking hand on the wooden doorframe. He hasn't actually said he liked anything in 3 long months, she whispered brokenly. I made Mason hot chocolate the way I used to make it for Caroline when her lungs were violently failing. Expensive whole milk, a tiny pinch of sea salt, and 1 massive marshmallow. He tightly held the warm ceramic mug in both small hands and softly asked what was in the heavy blue jar. My little sister's cold sand from this exact lake a very long time ago, I answered softly. He looked at me and nodded once. She should have it, Sapleshmek at sunrise. I told him she would like that. That freezing night, the bitter wind howling off Lake George was steady and violently loud. Mason slept peacefully in the exact room where my sister had taken her final breath. I sat alone at the marble kitchen counter until 2 in the morning, and I was not afraid of the dark. Let me go back one day, December 22nd. Hannah had posted a manipulated photo on Instagram. I knew because Olivia's 22-year-old babysitter instantly sent me a hidden screenshot. The sweet babysitter had also been acting as my eyes and ears on Hannah's toxic behavior since early June. The photo was a filtered throwback, Christmas 2008. Caroline was 12.5 years old. She was sitting weakly on the massive leather couch in the lake house, wearing a heavy red velvet dress my mother had bought her for the holidays. Matthew was 14, Jonathan was 9, wearing bright fire truck pajamas. I had personally taken the beautiful picture. Hannah had posted it to her public grid. Hannah, who had never met Caroline, who had violently refused to attend a single Heart Heroes fundraising event, who had been stealing as the fraudulent treasurer for 18 full months without ever opening a single devastating donor file. Her massive caption read, "Continuing our beautiful family tradition this incredible year at the luxury lake house. Passing unconditional love through generations. So grateful for this beautiful legacy. Blessed family first Christmas at the lake." She had tagged my private account, and had also tagged the exact geographical location of the lake house. 1,847 massive likes by 4 p.m. I slowly made a cup of green tea, and did not respond to the toxic post or screenshot it myself. I did not need to. The brilliant babysitter had done that already, and the digital metadata was preserved for a federal subpoena. I calmly opened the yellow leather notebook, December 22nd. Hannah public claim of take legacy use at final confrontation photo metadata held. I closed the heavy notebook and looked out the massive window. The freezing lake was an endless sheet of cold, unforgiving metal in the late afternoon shadows. The wooden dock had a massive foot of fresh snow violently resting on it. I thought for the very first time in 3 exhausting months that I might violently cry, and did not. I walked to the linen closet and pulled out 4 fresh sets of expensive clean sheets. I slowly walked upstairs and flawlessly made the guest beds in the massive bedrooms my toxic brother and his complicit family would comfortably sleep in for one more night. The sheer terrifying audacity. She had violently taken Caroline's sacred Christmas memory and weaponized it into a pathetic Instagram hashtag. I would graciously let her keep it until 8 p.m. on Christmas Eve. December 23rd, 10 p.m. The exhausted Bradford family was asleep downstairs. The walkout room was dark and peaceful. I could see through the open doorway from the main living room the faint, rhythmic pulse of the oxygen tank's bright blue indicator light, and sat at the marble kitchen counter. I slowly drafted one text message to my brother Matthew and rewrote it 3 agonizing times. The final devastating version was 19 words. "Matthew, before you drive up tomorrow, please call me just 10 minutes. There is something we need to discuss." I sent it at 10:08 p.m. and watched the 3 digital typing dots. They came up, they violently went down, they came up again, they violently went down again. They came up a massive 4th time at 10. His pathetic reply was 22 cowardly words. "Victoria, super busy with the kids and packing the car. Can it please wait till we get there? Love you, we'll catch up tomorrow." A small, pathetic red heart emoji at the very end. He had used a tiny red heart and had once violently drafted massive corporate motions for the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. He could now only type one cowardly paragraph to his sister and violently add a toxic heart emoji. I read it twice and did not reply. In the heavy yellow notebook I wrote one line: "Matthew. Last chance offered, violently declined." I underlined the terrifying word declined. I gave my older brother one chance to save his own miserable life. Forensic architects relentlessly test the load before they legally declare a structural wall violently failed. I had tested, he had not held the weight and had violently let his toxic wife steal from his dead sister's sacred name, and he had refused to notice the massive bleeding. He had violently let his sister sit alone in a freezing kitchen for 6 agonizing months building a massive federal wire fraud case, and he had never asked a single question. A small pathetic red heart. I violently poured the rest of my cooling tea down the metal sink. I rinsed the ceramic cup. I violently left it on the metal drying rack. I went to my bedroom. I slept. This is something average people do not understand about predators. The freezing night before the most violent, devastating confrontation of my entire life, I slept like an absolute stone. December 24th, 3 p.m. Matthew and Hannah loaded their massive luxury Range Rover in the icy driveway of their massive house in Albany. Olivia was safely in the booster seat, Liam strapped in the car seat behind Hannah. 2 massive designer duffel bags, 3 wrapped expensive presents from a high-end boutique. I obviously did not physically see this. I am reconstructing it from what the terrified children later bravely told me. Olivia is a serious 6-year-old and she has a photographic memory I would have envied at any age. According to Olivia, Hannah looked in the rearview mirror and applied lipstick the exact color of crushed cranberries. Hannah violently said something to Matthew about it being massively easier once Victoria was locked downstairs in the basement. Matthew said something back about his sister not being the enemy. Hannah violently said she had not said enemy, she had said weird and isolated. Olivia bravely repeated the toxic word weird to me later in a very small, terrified voice, the way a smart child says a dangerous word she does not quite have a safe use for yet. Matthew did not answer her. He looked at the freezing road. Jonathan was violently driving separately from his luxury apartment in Albany. He drove his brand new 2024 Tesla and had not told anyone he was violently bringing anything. According to my later forensic count, his massive trunk contained a heavy leather notebook of his very own. He had been quietly keeping it since early June. At the freezing lake house, I prepared the massive execution chamber. I flawlessly set the long dining table for 10-5 on each side. Heavy white linen, my grandmother's polished antique silver, the heavy blue jar of sand on the massive windowsill in the walkout room where Mason had politely asked me to leave it. The heavy yellow notebook resting in the massive leather portfolio under the marble kitchen counter beneath 3 folded linen dish towels. The 47-page forensic audit, the 84 pages of massive federal wire evidence. The sealed, unopened envelope from the United States Attorney's Office for the Northern District of New York that had arrived by federal courier on December 18. I flawlessly made a massive beef tenderloin, I made fresh green beans and made a massive Yorkshire pudding from my mother's sacred recipe. I gently let little Mason help me roll the soft dough. Sarah peacefully lit the massive winter candles. I waited. At 5:14 p.m. I clearly heard heavy tires crunching the snow. The massive luxury Range Rover came violently down the steep drive. The bright headlights swept across the living room wall. Olivia's tiny voice was already clearly audible, a high excited string of rapid syllables about the massive frozen lake. Hannah violently stepped out first, wearing a heavy black designer coat, a massive cream silk scarf. The gold Cartier bracelet on her wrist caught for a blinding second in the aggressive headlamp glow, before she violently pulled the heavy cuff down to hide it. She walked the freezing path. She arrogantly smiled before she violently looked up. She always smiles first and looks second. Then she finally looked violently up. Sarah Bradford's rusted station wagon was parked 20 feet from her luxury SUV. The heavy metal hatch was wide open. A massive pediatric oxygen tank canvas case violently sat by the rusted rear bumper. Hannah's arrogant manufactured smile stopped moving. It did not fall, it completely violently froze. Matthew came around the massive car with little Liam violently in his heavy arms. Olivia jumped out and violently ran for the massive wooden porch. Inside the house, Sarah had clearly heard the heavy car doors slam. She peacefully came out of the beautiful walkout room into the main living room, casually brushing baking flour from her worn hands. Mason was a few small steps behind her, peacefully breathing into his small plastic medical mask. The bright blue indicator light on his heavy tank gently pulsed. I calmly walked out to meet Hannah at the massive front door and opened it wide for her. "Victoria," she hissed, her eyes darting violently toward the rusted station wagon. "Who is that? What is happening?" "Hannah, Matthew, come inside, there are important people you need to meet." Sarah bravely stepped forward. Polite, calm, desperate single mothers know how to powerfully walk into a hostile room. She gently held out her cold hand. "I am Sarah Bradford, this is my son Mason." Hannah's manicured hand came out purely automatically. Decades of aggressive corporate spouse training simply do not turn off. She shook it limply. "I am Hannah Vance, Matthew's wife. Why are you in our house on Christmas Eve?" I answered for her. "They are staying straight through New Year's Day and are Heart Heroes Foundation guests." Olivia, 6 years old and the only honest person in the toxic room, walked straight over, pointed. "Hi, is that little boy sick?" Mason knelt down slowly without speaking. He put out his small free hand. "I am Mason, I am 9, I have a broken heart problem like your Aunt Caroline did." Olivia looked violently up at me with massive terrified eyes. "Aunt Caroline got super sick like him?" "Yes, my sweet love, he is nice." Olivia gently took his small hand. Hannah violently turned to me. Her toxic voice was a terrifying hiss the children could not hear. "Victoria, kitchen right now." I followed her into the kitchen. Matthew violently came right after us. Sarah peacefully stayed in the main living room, with Mason, Olivia, and little Liam. She had flawlessly read the hostel room. Hannah violently turned around. She kept her toxic voice low, but the naked fury in it was terrifyingly tight. "What is this psychotic joke?" You rented our family lake house to 6 strangers on Christmas Eve? I calmly went to the metal kettle. I peacefully lit the gas burner, the bright blue flame caught. They are not strangers. Hannah and our sacred foundation guests. They have to violently leave right now. We drove 4 agonizing hours. They have a legally signed federal lease through January 1st. A massive lease? Victoria, you signed a binding lease on our family lake house without telling us? Are you actually losing your mind? Did that stupid bookkeeper Margaret tell you to do this? I slowly poured steaming hot water into the ceramic teapot and did not raise my calm voice. I do not run my massive real estate decisions by my toxic relatives, Hannah. I am 34 years old. I built this entire luxury house from scratch in 2018 and built the massive charitable foundation in 2012. This is not your foundation. Hannah shrieked, slamming her hand on the marble counter. This is our family's foundation. This is for the Vance family. I slowly poured a cup of Earl Grey and tightly held the ceramic cup. I violently looked at her. Yes, Hannah, it is Caroline's foundation. She clearly heard the terrifying way I said it, and did not understand the massive legal implications yet. She just violently heard the freezing temperature of it. I am calling Matthew's corporate law firm right now. We will violently see what a federal judge says about a psychotic host kicking her own family out of their own home. Call them, I whispered aggressively. That is a brilliant idea, Hannah. Have a senior corporate partner from your husband's massive firm advise you on the legal events of this exact evening. She violently blinked, confused. Matthew stepped forward. Hannah, violently stop, Victoria. I gently set the ceramic cup down and looked at my older brother. He violently looked away at the marble counter. Matthew, I said coldly, get Jonathan the exact second he walks in. Then I need all 3 of you violently with me downstairs in the walkout suite. Victoria, it is not a question, Matthew. I am phrasing it as one to be polite, but it is violently not. Jonathan arrived 36 p.m. He violently took in the entire living room. Mason, Sarah, Olivia, Liam, the massive standing oxygen tank. He did not flinch and kissed my forehead. He violently looked once at Hannah. He nodded at me. Hannah did not see the massive nod. Hannah had her expensive phone tightly in her shaking hand and was scrolling for a toxic contact. Finally, she violently yelled to Jonathan, your sister has lost her massive mind. There are 6 strangers living in the basement bedroom. She signed some kind of illegal. Victoria, Jonathan interrupted, ignoring Hannah's violent existence. What do you need me to do? Stand violently with me. He looked at me for a massive long beat, then he violently set down his heavy winter coat. All right, he whispered. Jonathan. Hannah shrieked, what is wrong with you? Why are you violently taking her side? I elegantly adjusted my vintage blazer. I picked up my empty ceramic teacup. The intervention is permanently adjourned, I said to the entire room. You all know where the front door is. Please make sure not to let it forcefully hit you on your way out. I turned my back and walked into the kitchen, leaving them drowning in the absolute wreckage of their own toxic, fraudulent lies, and did not look back or need to. The ultimate walkaway is never about looking back to see their pathetic faces. It is about the profound realization that you will never have to return to their poisonous ecosystem ever again. If you have ever been forced to walk away from the very toxic people who were supposed to protect and nurture you, I genuinely want you to internalize this absolute truth. Your silence is not weakness, your patience is not submission. It is simply the calculated time it takes to build a beautiful, indestructible empire from the absolute ground up. Let them arrogantly laugh at your thrift store sweaters. Let them mistakenly underestimate you, because the absolute greatest, most beautifully aggressive revenge in this entire pathetic world is legal, flawlessly executed and undeniable. And the very next time they try to slide a forged, manipulative contract across the table to steal your kingdom, you just softly smile, take a deep breath, and hand them the sold sign. Thank you for listening to Grace and Grit Stories. If this journey ignited a fire inside your soul, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel for more stories of absolute vindication, and never ever apologize for building your own kingdom in the beautiful silence.